Angelica Spurb.
Welcome to Spurbs Herbs, episode 94. We're rapidly coming up to episode 100. And today we're going to be talking about Shen, Baidu-san, Ginseng Powder to overcome pathogenic influences. As always, I'm your presenter, Dr. Greg Sperber. We have a lot to cover with this. This is a important, relatively important formula, but there's lots of information on it. So we have a lot to cover. So let's get into it. Today we'll be looking at another Chinese herbal formula, Shen. Let me try and get the tone marks in. Shen Baidu-san. Sorry, as I always do, I apologize for my Chinese pronunciation. I've had several years of Chinese. I'm still not good at pronunciation. Or ginseng powder to overcome pathogenic influences. And right off the bat, it has ginseng, which is probably one of the most well-known Chinese herbs out there. So that puts it right up there, which is interesting. Ginseng's in the name, but is it a chief herb? We're going to find out. It is under the subcategory of formulas that release exterior disorders with interior deficiency and is useful for treating external attacks or colds with underlying deficiency. We will be doing our deep dive into this formula as we always do. And while we usually do a little something different, today there's just so much to discuss about this important formula. There isn't time to add anything else. So we don't have a little something different. I've done this a couple times in the past, but rarely. So we don't have a little something different today. Our little something different is not having a little something different. So please join us as we don our spacesuits, do a spacewalk, and enter the unexplored space of medicinal herbs in this exciting episode. Before we get going, I wanted to tell you something. We are starting an amazing special for our courses. If you use them for continuing education, professional development, or just for your own edification, we are offering 50 hours of courses for an unbelievable price. Normally this would cost $750. However, with the special code 50 CEUs, that's 50 CEUS, the CEU is capitalized, but they don't have to be capitalized. This is going to be only $325, so less than half off, or only $6.50 per hour. Plus, and this is huge, you can get a free signed copy of one of my books. Just pay for shipping and handling. That is a free copy of Integrative Pharmacology, combining modern pharmacology with integrative medicine, or Playing the Game, a step-by-step approach to accepting insurance as an acupuncturist. Just go to the webpage www.integrativeMedicineCouncil.org/CEUs1. That's the number 1 for this amazing deal. That's www.integrativemedicinecouncil, that's COUNCIL.org/CEUS1, the number 1. And you can get this amazing deal. Never done a deal this good. Don't know how long it's going to last. So you might want to check it out sooner rather than later. Okay, so let's get into our formula today. Shen Baidu-san, or ginseng powder to overcome pathogenic influences. There are lots of other names for this as well. Most of them are kind of in the Chinese tradition, but let's see what we've got here. Overcome pathogenic influences powder, Baidu-san. So you can actually eliminate Shen from the name and just call it Baidu-san. We're going to talk a little bit more about that as we get into this. Another name for this is no top pterygium decoction, or Qianghuo Tang. We're going to say Qianghuo is one of our chief ingredients, is one of the, sometimes they're called chief ingredients, sometimes they're called emperor ingredients. And then we have 10 seasoned decoction, or Shi Tang, ginseng and pusidanum powder, or Shen Qianhu-san, Ginseng Baidu-san. So this is actually Jen, which is interesting, Shen, and P instead of B, and T instead of D. This is more of the way Giles' approach to this. So Ginseng Baidu-san, it's actually pronounced the same, Shen Baidu-san. Ginseng detoxifying formula, ginseng antiphlogistic powder. I love that name, even though I'm not even sure what antiphlogistic means. Ginseng and mentha formula is another one. So that's interesting because mentha is referring to boha, which is field mint, and it's actually a relatively minor, very minor ingredient to this formula. So to call it ginseng and mentha is interesting as a formula. But most typically it's Ren, Shen, Baidu-san or Baidu-san. So let's talk about this word do in here. Ren, Shen, Baidu-san. The word do in the name of this formula, although generally rendered as toxin, refers here to externally contracted pathogenic influences. The name suggests the ability of this formula to strengthen the normal qi and thereby enable the body to overcome pathogenic influences. And that's from one of our major textbooks. We have two major textbooks that we look at for herbal formulas, and this is from Shēn and his team, and we'll get into that was from them. This formula is in the subcategory of formulas that release exterior disorders with interior deficiency under the category of formulas that release the exterior. Now, we've been covering a lot of formulas that release the exterior, and so we're going to go over that category again in just a little bit. But that's a pretty big category. This is a subcategory over this. I think this is the first time we've covered. Well, maybe not. There may have been one other formula that we've covered that's in this subcategory of release the exterior disorders with interior deficiency. Our other usual formulas textbook, Chinese Medical Herbal Formulas and Applications, Pharmacological Effects and Clinical Research by Chen and Chen, says it is in the supporting the upright and releasing the exterior formulas subcategory under the exterior releasing formulas category. So basically the same thing with maybe some slight translational differences there, but basically supporting the upright and releasing the exterior formulas subcategory. Okay. So Chen and Chen says Baidu-san, Overcome Pathogenic Influences powder, and Ren, Shen, Baidu-san, Ginseng powder to overcome pathogenic influences, are essentially the same formulas with the same indications. The minor differences between these two formulas are preparation of some of the ingredients and the dose of Gansao, Ridexaut Rhizoma glycericerae, or licorice. Because of their overwhelming similarities, the names Baidu-san and Ren, Shen, Baidu-san are sometimes used interchangeably. In their book, Baidu-san is the main formula and Ren, Shen, Baidu-san is a small related formula with minimal information. Because of all this, we will be using the main monograph of Baidu-san from Chen and Chen and compare it to the Ren, Shen, Baidu-san monograph in Shēn et al. This seems reasonable as the source for these two formulas is the same, while Ren, Shen, Baidu-san and Chen have a different original source, as we will discuss under history. So we really are looking at the same formulas. Chen says it's Baidu-san. Shēn et al. Says Ren, Shen, Baidu-san. Most of my graduate training in this was from an earlier version of Shēn, which was still written by Bensky, who wrote our individual herb book, textbook, but he also wrote the formulas book, and I always learned it as Ren, Shen, Baidu-san. So I'm continuing that trend here. So as we've discussed in several previous episodes, Shēn et al. Described the overall category of formulas that release the exterior in the following way. When a pathogenic influence first penetrates the body, it tends to cause a disorder of the exterior. In this context, the term exterior, biao, denotes the superficial layers of the body comprised of the skin and muscles. These are perfused by the body's protective qi, which is fierce and hot in nature, and whose task it is to warm and defend against penetration into the body by external pathogens. If a pathogenic influence lodges in this aspect of the body, it not only obstructs the normal physiological diffusion of qi and fluids there, but encourages the body to move more protective qi toward the exterior in an attempt to push out the invading pathogen. For this reason, Exterior disorders are characterized by fever and chills, indicating obstruction of normal physiological warming, even as protective yang in the exterior tends toward excess. Head and body aches, indicating obstruction of qi and fluids in the most yang, i.e. exterior portions of the body. And a floating pulse, indicating the movement of protective yang toward the exterior. Since wind is the vehicle by which other external pathogenic influences enter the body via the exterior, it is involved in most exterior disorders, especially those involving cold and heat. Thus it is said that wind is the leader of the 100 diseases, Feng Wei Bai Bing Zhi Zhang. The symptoms associated with an exterior disorder indicate that the body is actively trying to overcome obstruction of the qi dynamic by one or more of the 6 pathogenic influences. Treatment in Chinese medicine seeks to support these physiological reactions through strategies that release the pathogenic influence from the exterior, or jie biao. For this purpose, one deploys light, acrid, moving herbs that unblock obstruction, diffuse the protective qi, and disseminate fluids to vent pathogenic influences back toward the outside. No other strategy will prevent the pathogenic influence from penetrating more deeply into the body. Often, but not always, this results in sweating. This type of sweating indicates that an obstruction has been overcome and that the qi and fluids can once again stream to the surface of the body. Like the flow of water that breaks through a dam, the sweating may initially be pronounced, especially if a very acrid and warming formula is used. However, the profuse sweating should quickly abate as the body finds its physiological balance. For this reason, releasing the exterior is often equated with inducing sweating. Yet, in many contexts where formulas to release the exterior are used, the sweating may hardly be noticeable, or strong pathological sweating may evolve into a mild physiological sweat. This is because the ultimate goal of these formulas is not to promote sweating, but to unblock and restore order to the flow of qi and fluids. The term release from the exterior was first described in chapter 5 of Basic Questions. So the Basic Questions refers to the Huangdi Neijing Su Wen, which is the Yellow Emperor's classic Basic Questions. And this is the oldest existing book on Chinese medicine. It's sort of, I use this word a little bit advisedly. It's sort of the Bible of Chinese medicine. It came out about 2,200 years ago. It is one of the oldest existing books on Chinese medicine around, and probably medicine in general. There's a few books in the Greek tradition that may be around from that period of time. So this is an old book and foundational for Chinese medicine. So first, this term release from the exterior was first described in chapter 5 of Basic Questions. If a person harbors a pathogen, the body becomes soaked as the movement of protective qi to the exterior transforms fluids into sweat. Hence, when the pathogen is at the level of the skin, use sweating to discharge it. The first known text to list herbal formulas that embody this strategy is the early 3rd century work Discussion of Cold Damage, or the Shanghan Lung, which provides some of the most influential formulas in this category, such as ephedra decoction Ma Huang Tong, cinnamon twig decoction Guizhi Tong, and their variants. So this book, Discussion of Cold Damage, or Shanghan Lung, is probably the oldest existing book on Chinese herbal formulas. It's written about 220 CE, so about 400 years after the Huangdi Neijing, but very foundational for herbal formulas. Its focus on acrid warming herbs to overcome obstruction from wind, cold, and dampness dominated medical practice until the Jin Yuan dynasties of the 12th to 14th centuries. Innovation until then consisted of extending the range of substances used to promote sweating rather than in seeking new areas of application. This changed in the 12th century with Liu Wansu's focus on heat pathogens, which led to the idea that heat in the exterior can occur there directly rather than being due to constraint caused by cold. Venting such heat requires the use of acrid cooling substances which do not necessarily promote noticeable sweating. The treatment strategies and formulas composed by 17th and 18th century physicians like Ye Tianshi and Wu Jutang who are associated with the warm pathogen current or school are most emblematic of this approach. Other innovations stemming from the Jinyuan era are the combination of exterior venting with tonifying herbs to treat exterior excess combined with deficiency of qi, blood, or fluids in the interior, and the use of herbs to dispel pathogens from specific channels and their associated surface regions. Sweating is the first of the 8 methods of treatment formulated by the 18th century physician Cheng Guopeng, underlining its importance in clinical practice. Yet many practitioners continue to underrate this method. This is unfortunate because the odds of preventing the development of a serious condition are always better when intervention occurs at the early stage of an illness. It is best to treat diseases at the level of the skin and hair. The next best is to treat them at the level of the muscles and flesh. The next best is to treat them at the level of the sinews and vessels. The next best is to treat them at the level of the 6 yang organs. The next best is to treat them at the level of the 5 yin organs. When treating at the level of the 5 yin organs, half the patients die and the other half survive. This is a quote, again, from that chapter 5 of the Huangdi Neijing Su Wen, or the Basic Questions, Yellow Emperor's Classic of Internal Medicine Basic Questions. By the way, when I say basic questions, there's 2 halves to the Huangdi Neijing. One is the Su Wen, and the other one totally went out of my head, but there's 2 parts to it. So the Su Wen is what we're talking about here. Successful use of the formulas discussed in this category will be aided by paying attention to the following principles. First, accurate diagnosis is essential. If an interior disorder develops before the exterior has been released, the practitioner must choose between releasing the exterior first or treating the exterior and interior simultaneously. The formulas in this chapter are inappropriate for treating disorders solely of the interior, expressed rashes, or edema due to deficiency. Likewise, it is important to be clear about the precise nature of the pathogenic influence to be released, as this determines the choice of formula. One must be cognizant of the type of sweating to expect from a particular formula. Second, most of these formulas should be cooked briefly. They treat acute disorders and are prepared as decoctions or powders. They contain substances that are light and volatile in nature, which, if subjected to too much heat, lose their efficacy. And I just want to add, when they say volatile in nature here, they're talking about volatile oils, which can boil off. And so just think of like mint as a great example. There's a lot of other in this category, but mint is a great example. If you boil mint, the mint oils will boil off and it will not be very effective. Third, formulas taken hot after meals will provide the best results. Sweating is further encouraged by instructing the patient to bundle up after taking the medicine. As the goal of sweating is not sweating itself, but to assist the function of the protective qi, only a slight sweat over the entire body is needed to release the exterior. Excessive sweating dissipates the qi and fluids. And fourth, the formula and dosage should be adjusted to the individual's constitution, local climate, and season. For example, a person who sweats easily, lives in a warm climate, and contracts an illness during the spring or summer requires only mild treatment. On the other hand, a person who does not sweat easily, lives in a cold climate, and contracts an illness in the autumn or winter requires stronger treatment. So that is Scheid's book explaining the category of formulas that release the exterior. Let's see what he says specifically about the subcategory formulas that release exterior disorders with interior deficiency. So Scheid et al. Continues to describe the subcategory. The formulas in this subcategory address those cases in which a person suffering from interior deficiency contracts a disease of external origin and where the ensuing disorder is characterized by symptoms of both excess and deficiency. The complexity of these disease patterns requires the use of formulas that are themselves complex, and that they combine herbs that release the excess from the exterior with herbs that tonify the deficiency in the interior. This is one example of using the method of supporting the normal while dispelling the pathogen, or Fuzhong Chu Xie. With the exception of the patterns discussed here, these two classes of herbs would rarely be used together. Tonifying herbs are ordinarily contraindicated for exterior conditions, as are exterior releasing herbs in cases of interior deficiency. They make each other worse. Like we have a saying that, this is me talking, not Scheid. We have a saying that says, if you tonify an external pathogen, during an external pathogen, you tonify the external pathogen, not the person. And so that's why we don't generally do tonifying herbs. And by the same token, if you're releasing the exterior with someone who has an interior deficiency, you're going to push all what's left of the stuff that they're deficient in to the outside, and the deficiency is going to get worse. So they should not be used together. Okay, back to Scheid. The particular formulation of herbs in these prescriptions is based on whether the underlying deficiency is one of qi, blood, yin, or yang, qi, which are known as the four substances. Qi and yang deficient patients will tend to be those invaded by wind, cold, and dampness. For this reason, formulas that treat these conditions combine acrid warming herbs that disperse pathogens from the exterior, such as ephedra herba, ma huang, notop turigii, rhizoma radix, qiang huo, Sapashnacovia radix, fong. I love saying Sapashnacovia. I don't know why. Maybe it's my Russian background. Or Perilla folium zisuye, with qi tonics such as Astragalus radix huang qi and Ginseng radix ren Shen, or herbs that warm the interior such as Aconites radix lateralis preparata, Fudza, and Asari radix et rhizoma Shen. Blood and yin deficient patients, on the other hand, are more prone to invasion by wind heat, or if wind cold invades, require strategies that do not emphasize sweating, as this would further damage the essences. For that reason, the formulas used to treat such patterns combine herbs that enrich the yin and nourish the blood, such as Radix romania glutinose, or Shen Di Wang, Ophiopagonus radix Maimendong, and Polygonati odorati rhizoma Yu, with acrid cooling or slightly warming herbs that gently vent pathogens from the exterior, such as Methahaplocalicis herba or boha, that's field mint, Soje semen preparatum, dandochi, or prepared soybean, or Alii fistulosi bulbus songbai, which is green onion. So there you go. You kind of know all those herbs, even if you don't know herbs. And that's it for an overview of formulas that release the exterior, as well as formulas that release exterior disorders with interior deficiency. So that's the overview. Let's get back into specifics about this formula, and let's talk about its Chinese medical actions. So Scheid and his team say this formula releases the exterior, dispels wind and dampness, and augments the qi. Chen say it releases the exterior through diaphoresis, sweating, dispels wind, cold, and dampness, and tonifies the qi. Tonifies qi, not the qi, tonifies qi. That's a subtle difference, and it's just a translational difference, but I want to make sure I'm saying the right thing. So those are the actions, Chinese medical actions. What are the indications? So why would you use these? So Scheid et al. Say this formula can be used for, quote, high fever accompanied by severe chills and shivering, absence of sweating, pain and stiffness of the head and neck, soreness and pain of the extremities, focal distension and fullness of the chest, nasal congestion with sonorous breathing, a productive cough, a greasy white tongue coating, and a floating soggy pulse. This is externally contracted wind cold dampness battling the body's deficient normal qi, which is unable to expel the pathogenic influences. This produces a high fever, severe chills and shivering, an absence of sweating, and pain and stiffness of the head and neck. Lingering dampness causes focal distension and fullness in the chest. The deficiency of qi allows dampness to penetrate rather quickly, producing a greasy white tongue coating. If the qi were strong, the tongue coating would remain thin and white. The attack of wind cold on the lungs disrupts the circulation of qi, causing nasal congestion, sonorous breathing, and a productive cough. The presence of wind, cold, and dampness at the level of the muscles produces generalized soreness and pain and a floating pulse. The floating, soggy quality of the pulse reflects the deficiency of qi, which is the salient aspect of this disorder. So Chen and Chen say Baidu-san. Remember, Chen calls it Baidu-san. Shai calls it Ren-Chen Baidu-san. So Chen and Chen say Baidu-san treats exterior wind, cold, and dampness with qi deficiency. Aversion to cold, fever, headache, neck stiffness, joint pain, body ache, absence of perspiration, nasal obstruction, cough with sputum, a feeling of distension and fullness in the chest and diaphragm, a pale tongue with a white greasy tongue coating, and a superficial soggy or superficial rapid pulse that is forceless upon pressure. So that is how Chen explains the indications, Chinese medical indications. So what's the history of this formula? So both Scheid and his team and Chen both agree on the source for this formula, though they do translate the Chinese name Xiao Yao Zhongzhi Zhui differently. So Scheid et al. Translate this as craft of medicines and patterns for children. Chen translate it as craft of medicinal treatment for childhood disease patterns. So what we get here with both of these is this is a pediatric formula. We're going to talk about that in just a minute. Both agree it was written in 1119 by Qian Yi. So I'd like to bring out when these are, sometimes Chen and Scheid agree. Sometimes they don't agree with where these first come out. So I think it's really interesting when they do first agree. That means there's a pretty strong consensus. When they don't agree, it's just as interesting. And I try to figure out why they don't agree, but I'm not a historian of ancient Chinese medicine. So unfortunately, I can only kind of go with what the books say at this point. Let's get into the ingredients of Ren-Shen Baidu-san. There's quite a few. So according to Scheid et al., the herbs in this formula reflect the twin strategies of expelling the pathogenic influences and strengthening the deficient qi. Because the formula is designed for acute, externally contracted disorders, the emphasis is on expelling the pathogenic influences. So there you go. And we can tell which herbs are doing that. We'll see things like it released the exterior herbs, and we'll see coughing herbs. And we know that's going to be for the expelling the pathogenic influences. And then we're going to have the tonified qi herbs. So it's going to be clear what is what as we talk about these individual ingredients. So let's start off with No-Top Tierji Rhizoma Suradix Qiang Huo. Qiang Huo. All of these, except for Gansao, are using 30 grams. And that may seem odd. First of all, that's a fairly high dose of herbs in general. But this formula, as we're going to see as it's prepared, is supposed to be powdered, and then you take a small amount of it with some particular tea, which we're going to get into. So you're not really doing 30 grams in like a decoction as we would do in normal times here. So kind of keep that in mind with these doses of 30 grams. No-Top Tierji Rhizoma Suradix Qiang Huo is a warm, acrid herb that releases the exterior. Its functions are it releases the exterior and disperses cold, unblocks painful obstruction and alleviates pain, guides qi to the greater yang channel and governing vessel. And here's its explanation for why it's in this formula. The chief herbs, No-Top Tierji Rhizoma Suradix Qiang Huo and Angelica pubescentis radix Du Huo, dispel wind cold from the exterior, dispel dampness, and alleviate pain. These herbs address the primary symptoms of fever and chills without sweating, headache, and generalized pain and soreness. By the way, this combination of Qiang Huo and Du Huo is a combination we call the two Huos, and they're often used together. They're very good for pain. Okay, our next herb is Angelicae pubescentis radix or duhuo. Again, 30 grams. And this actually comes from the category herbs that dispel wind dampness. So again, we can say this is more of a dispersing sort of herb. And its functions include dispels wind dampness and alleviates pain, disperses wind, cold, damp, and releases the exterior. Also used for lesser yin stage headache and toothache. This is the other chief herb of this formula. And Shen say Changhuo Rhizoma radix notopterygi and Duhuo radix angelica pubescentis act as the chief herbs to dispel wind, cold, and dampness from the whole body. So in other words, it says pretty much the same thing that Shai et al. Says about these two herbs. Our next herb is Chuanxiang rhizoma or Chuanxiang. 30 grams, herbs that regulate the blood. So this is an interesting one in this category. Invigorates the blood, promotes the movement of qi, expels wind, and alleviates pain. And Shai explains its use here. Chuanxiang rhizoma, Chuanxiang, one of the deputies, helps the chief herbs release the exterior, moves the blood, and dispels wind, which enhances the pain-relieving action of the formula, especially in the head and neck. Chuanxiang, according to, this is Chen now, saying Chuanxiang rhizoma Chuanxiang activates blood circulation to relieve pain. It also dispels exterior wind and cold. So there you go. Again, very similar between the two books. Our next herb is Bupleury radix or Chai Hu. Again, 30 grams. And this is from the category of cool, acrid herbs that release the exterior. Its traditional functions are resolves lesser yang disorders, reduces fever, spreads liver qi and relieves constraint, and raises and lifts the yang qi, specifically the clear qi of the stomach and gallbladder. And Shai says its use in this formula. The other deputies, Bupleury radix Chai Hu and Mentha haplocalcisis herba boha, release the exterior, reduce the fever, and expel the pathogenic influences. Together, they are particularly effective in releasing pathogenic influences from the muscle layer. According to Chen, Chai Hu radix Bupleury helps the chief herbs release the exterior. Our next herb is Platycody radix Jiegong, 30 grams, and it's a warm herb that transforms cold phlegm. Its traditional functions are opens up and disseminates the lung qi, dispels phlegm and benefits the throat, pushes out pus, and opens up and raises the lung qi while also directing the actions of other herbs to the upper regions of the body. As assistants, this is according to Shai again for this formula, as assistants, the ascending action of Platycody radix Jiegong and the descending action of Aurantii fructus or Zhirka is a very effective combination for regulating the flow of qi in the chest, thereby relieving the symptoms of discomfort in the chest. These two herbs also interact with Pusidani radix Qianhu to improve the circulation of lung qi, expel phlegm, and stop the coughing. Chen say Jiegong radix platyconus and Qianhu radix Pusidani relieve coughing and dispel phlegm. And let's go to our next ingredient, which is bran fried Aurantii fructus or fu chow, which means bran fried, Zhirka. Again, 30 grams. And this is in the category of herbs that regulate the qi. And its sole function is traditional function is to promote the flow of qi. And you might be wondering, like, we're not talking about any stagnations here. Why are we moving qi in this? And the reason why you'll often see qi movers in formulas that are tonifying is tonifying stagnates. And so it's we say that most tonifying herbs are cloying and can stagnate. So we will push in herbs that help move either blood or qi or whatever to kind of counteract that stagnating sort of action that can happen with tonification. Okay, so why are we dry frying this? This is again from Scheid et al. Dry frying, usually with bran, makes its actions more moderate and reduces the slight digestive irritation that the sour flavor can cause, and is thus more appropriate for elderly or weak patients or for inclusion in tonifying formulas to aid digestion. It's also, and it says, so you're looking at this and you're like, okay, this is interesting, but remember, this was a pediatric formula at the beginning. So that would fall under this category of potentially weak patients. So, and they usually have trouble with digestion. Kids usually have trouble with digestion. We have to keep, support their digestion. So it makes sense that this would be in a pediatric formula. But this isn't just a pediatric formula. It is an actual formula that's used in adults now, but it's a gentle formula, so that's good. Chen say zhi chow, fructus aureatii. Zhi chow, we said zhi ke. Zhi chow is the same thing. It's just, they're the same herb with slightly different names. Regulates the, so zhi chow regulates the chi flow of the lung to relieve chest distension and fullness in this formula. Our next herb we mentioned earlier is Pusidani radix qianhu, again 30 grams as the dosage. And herbs that cool, it's from the category herbs that cool and transform phlegm heat. Directs qi downward, dispels phlegm, and disperses and scatters wind heat. And for this formula, the phlegm that collects in the lungs is produced in the spleen. For this reason, Pusidani radix qianhu is used with Poria fuling, which transforms phlegm and strengthens the spleen. And Zingiberis rhizoma recens shengjiang, that's fresh ginger, to treat both the branch and root of this disorder. So there you go. That's Pusidani, bringing in a couple of herbs that we're going to get into in just a little bit, but not quite yet. Our next one finally is the title herb, Ginseng radix ren Shen. Shen, it is, again, 30 grams is used in this formula. And it's from the tonified qi category of herbs. So ren Shen, very, very famous Chinese medical herb. When I was first studying Chinese medicine, even before I was in Chinese medical school, ren Shen was the herb of the moment. So, and while it's gone down in how many people are using it, it's still right up there. So according to Bensky and his team, again, Bensky is one of our major texts for looking at individual herbs rather than formulas. So ren Shen has the following actions. It powerfully tonifies the primal qi, strengthens the spleen and tonifies the stomach, tonifies the lungs and augments the qi, generates fluids and stops thirst, benefits the heart qi and calms the spirit. And according to Scheid et al., the tonifying herbs in this formula, including Ginseng radix ren Shen, Poria fuling, and Glycericerae radix gansao, those are the tonifying herbs. These are three of the 4 herbs and 4 gentlemen decoction of Sejunzitang. Sejunzitang is sort of the classic formula for tonifying qi. It is like a nice. It's a 4 herb Sejunzitang, 4 gentlemen, 4 herb little formula that is great at tonifying qi, incredibly balanced within itself. And so that's what we're talking about here. Ginseng radix ren Shen, an assistant, serves 3 functions here. It strengthens the normal qi to expel the pathogenic influences, generates fluid so that sweating becomes possible, and strengthens the body's resistance to invasion, which prevents a relapse. Cotinopsis radix dongxian is usually substituted for Ginseng radix ren Shen at 2 to 3 times its dosage. Chen say, that's because, by the way, ren Shen can be very expensive to get good quality. Dongshen has become sort of the go-to substitution. However, Dongshen's price has gone up quite a bit since I've been an herbalist and is not much less than ren Shen at this point, especially not if you're using 2 to 3 times its dosage. So just something to keep in mind. Chen say, ren Shen radix et rhizoma ginseng is used to tonify yuan source qi, which strengthens the body to help expel the exterior factors. Moreover, Shen, radix out rhizoma ginseng, balances and prevents the acrid and strong properties of the exterior releasing herbs from damaging the weak body. Lastly, by tonifying qi, this herb prevents future reinfections and reduces the susceptibility of the body to exterior pathogens. Our next herb is one of those 3 of 4 herbs, Poria Fuling, again 30 grams. And this is from the category of herbs that drain dampness. Traditionally, it promotes urination and leaches out dampness, strengthens the spleen and harmonizes the middle burner, strengthens the spleen and transforms phlegm, and quiets the heart and calms the spirit. Another assistant, Poria Fuling, leaches out dampness, promotes urination, transforms phlegm, and strengthens the spleen. Tonifies without causing stagnation or retention of pathogenic influences, unlike the tonic herb Atractylotus macrocephalae, rhizoma, or Baiju. Shen say Fuling Poria dispels dampness through diuresis and tonifies the middle jiao, middle burner. Our next herb is Glycericerae radix gansao, licorice. And here, instead of 30 grams, we're using 15 grams. So this is the only difference in the dosing of these so far, and in general. Herbs that tonify the qi is the category this is from, so another qi tonic. Tonifies the spleen and augments the qi, moistens the lungs and stops coughs, moderates spasms and alleviates pain, and moderates and harmonizes the characteristics of other herbs. The envoy, Glycericerae radix gansao, assists ginseng radix Shen in tonifying the qi and also harmonizes the actions of the other ingredients, according to Scheid et al. And then our next herb, so this is a little bit different. So all the herbs that we talked about so far are to be powdered, as we're going to mention in preparation in just a minute. Now we're talking about 2 herbs that are supposed to be part of the tea that we drink when we take the powder. So the first of these is Zingiberis rhizoma recens Shenjiang, or fresh ginger. And it's just, the quote is a small amount. And it's from the warm acrid herbs that release the exterior. So small amount is dosed, basically. It releases the exterior and disperses cold, warms the middle burner and alleviates vomiting, warms the lungs and stops cough, and resolves toxicity. Zingiberis rhizoma recens Shenjiang also helps release the exterior. All of these herbs serve as assistants. And finally, we have Menthe haplocalicis herba boha. Again, small amount is used as part of the tea that you drink with the powder traditionally, and it's from the cool acrid herbs that release the exterior. So traditionally, it clears and benefits the head, eyes, and throat, vents rashes and courses the liver and moves qi. Chen and Chen say boha herba menthe and Shenjiang rhizoma zingiberis recens help relieve exterior symptoms. And that's it for our ingredients. Let's talk about the preparation we've been referring to as we've been going along here. Scheid et al. Discusses preparation of this formula. The source text advises to grind the ingredients into a fine powder and cook 6 grams together with a small amount of Zingiberis rhizoma recens Shenjiang and Menthe haplocalicis herba boha. At present, this formula is often prepared as a decoction with the doses of the ingredients reduced by about 80%. So instead of 30 grams for most of these, you're only using 6 grams. And the licorice, the gansao, you'd only be using 3 grams for that, which is, a typical dose of gansao can be anywhere from 1.5 grams to 9 grams. So 3 grams is right in the ballpark there. Commentary. As usual, Scheid et al. Has an excellent commentary about this formula. This formula was originally devised for children suffering from externally contracted wind cold dampness. Because the source qi in children is not fully developed, a strategy was required that would tonify the qi in order to expel the pathogenic influences. Later, the application of this formula was expanded to include all cases of wind cold dampness in patients with underlying qi deficiency and phlegm dampness obstructing the qi dynamic, including the elderly, postpartum women, and those recovering from a debilitating illness. Most of the debate surrounding this formula has focused on the precise function of ginseng radix or Ren Shen. Its use in formulas designed to expel external pathogens can be traced back to several formulas in Discussion on Cold Damage. Remember, that's the original book on herb formulas in Chinese medicine, including cinnamon twig and ginseng decoction, Guizhi Ren Shen Tang, and minor bupleurum decoction, Xiao Chai Hu Tang. However, whereas the role of ginseng radix Ren Shen in these formulas is generally regarded as merely strengthening the source qi in the middle burner, influential Qing-era physicians like Yu Chang, Zhang Lu, and Zhang Bingcheng extended its role here to include the active enhancement of the function of the chief ingredients in pushing pathogens back to the outside. Wu Ju Tang, the famous systematizer of warm pathogen disease therapeutics, even went so far as to designate ginseng radix Ren Shen as the chief herb in this formula. However, these interpretations were criticized by Fei Bo Xiang, who generally favored ordering the qi dynamic in all disorders, and therefore viewed ginseng radix Ren Shen as addressing any deficiency. A clear and useful understanding of the formula is provided by Xiaoyu Huang in Discussion of Famous Physicians' Formulas Past and Present, or the Mingyi Fang Lun, written in 1675. Now, if you're looking at my thing, it says by Lo Mei. You find that a lot of the ancients had multiple names, so it's the same person, but it was written in 1675. He thought of this formula as a complement to 9-herb decoction with notab pterygium, Jiaohui Qianghuo Tang. Both formulas were composed during the same period, have the same chief herb, and treat an invasion of wind-cold dampness or unseasonable qi that relies on sweating in order to expel the pathogen. Xiaoyu Huang notes that such sweating can only be produced if the body has sufficient fluids and qi. 9-herb decoction with notab pterygium, Jiaohui Qianghuo Tang, uses Rehmannia radix Shengdi Huang to increase the fluids where they are deficient. The present formula similarly employs ginseng radix Ren Shen to tonify the qi. The Qing physician Yu Chang extended the indication of this formula to treat early-stage wind-cold damp dysenteric disorders with exterior symptoms, which he believed were caused by sinking of the pathogenic influences into the intestines. This approach, known as hauling the boat upstream, or Ni Liu Wanzhou, remains popular today, but at the time represented a major departure from standard practice. Unlike diarrhea, which is a pathology of middle burner qi transformation, dysenteric disorders are thought to be due to pathogens, mainly damp heat toxin, obstructing the flow of qi in the intestines. The preferred treatment strategy for resolving this pathology is to follow the inherent dynamic of the disorder, where pathogens move inward and downward, and the physiology of the organ systems involved, the qi of the bowel moves downward by draining the damp heat and regulating the qi and blood. Yu Chang's approach moves in the opposite direction, employing herbs that are ascending and that dispel pathogens from the surface. This ascending movement is what hauling the boat upstream refers to. Examined more closely, however, Yu Chang's treatment strategy also facilitates the physiological movement of qi in the intestines by removing obstruction from both the lungs, tied to the large intestine via an interior-exterior relationship, and the qi dynamic. It represents a further development in an approach to the treatment of early-stage dysenteric disorders already embodied in kudzu decoction or gugentang, which stops diarrhea by dispelling pathogens from the exterior of the greater yang and yang brightness channels. Both formulas treat early-stage dysentery characterized by fever and chills. However, kudzu decoction gugentang supplements the fluids and stops spasms in the bowels and is thus indicated where wind symptoms predominate. Ginseng Powder to Overcome Pathogenic Influences, Ren Shen Baidu-san, on the other hand, opens the qi dynamic and promotes water metabolism and is thus indicated where dampness predominates. The principal formula is also used for very early stage measles before the rash has begun to surface, characterized by moderate fever and chills, no significant thirst, loose stools, a white tongue coating, and a thin, weak pulse. The modern physician Wei Mei Zhong has extended this application and uses the formula in the treatment. So that was Scheid et al.'s commentary. Chen have a little commentary as well. They say Baidu-san was originally designed for children whose yuan or source qi is still insufficient. A small amount of Renshen, radix et rhizoma ginseng, is added to boost the yuan qi to help push out the exterior pathogenic factors. Today, however, the clinical applications of Baidu-san have been vastly expanded. In addition to the traditional indications, this formula is now commonly used for various types of patients: children, the elderly, and patients who are convalescent, postpartum, nursing, or with deficiency, and for various conditions: common colds, bronchitis, allergic dermatitis, urticaria, eczema, and other disorders with itching of the skin characterized by wind, cold, dampness. Modifications. So there are many modifications of this formula. We'll go over them briefly here. Scheid and his team discuss many modifications. If the normal qi is not weak and exterior cult symptoms are very pronounced, remove ginseng radix Renshen and add Schizonipide herba Jingjie and Sapashnacovia radix Feng Feng, or use the associated formula Schizonipide and Sapashnacovia powder to overcome pathogenic influences, Jingfeng Baidu-san. If qi deficiency is severe, increase the dosage of ginseng radix Renshen or add Astragalus radix Huang Qi, another very good tonifying herb. If dampness, that's Astragalus, by the way, if you're familiar with that. If dampness obstructs the muscle layer with pronounced aching, soreness, and pain in the muscles and joints, add Clematis radix Weiling Xian, Mori ramulus Songzhi, Gentiana macrocephalae radix Qinjiao, or radix aristolochii Feng Qi or Feng Ji. If coughing is severe, add Semen pruni Arminaceae Xingren, and that's apricot pit, and Sinanchi Statonii Rhizoma Bai Qian. For wind toxin dormant papules, add Cicadae Periosticum Chuan Tui, and Sephora flavicentis radix Ku Shen. For early stage sores, remove ginseng radix Renshen and add Forsythia fructus Lian Chao and Linicerae flos Jinyin Hua. Chen also has several modifications. If there is itching or eczema, add Ku Shen, radix Sephora flavicentes, and Chuan Tui periosticum cicadae. For rash or incomplete eruption of dermatological disorders caused by wind, heat, and toxins, add Xiao Feng San, eliminate wind powder. For the initial stages of skin lesions such as sores and carbuncles, remove Renshen, Rhizoma et Rhizoma ginseng, and add Jinyin Hua, Flossonicerae japonica, and Lian Chao, fructus forsythia. Again, very similar to what Scheid said. For febrile disorders with thirst but no aversion to wind or cold, add Huang Qin, radix scutularia. If there is no sign of dampness at the exterior, remove Qiang Huo, Rhizoma et radix notop pterygii, Du Huo radix angelica pubescentes, and Fu Ling poria. If there's no sign of coughing or sputum, remove Jie Gong, radix platyconus, and Qian Hu, radix pusidani. That's our modifications. Let's get into comparisons. So Scheid et al. Does not compare this formula with any others. However, Chen discusses one. Baidu-san and Jingfeng Baidu-san, Schizonepida Sapashnacovia powder to overcome pathogenic influences. Both treat beginning stages of suppuration, characterized by sores and ulcerations with fever, aversion to cold, absence of sweating, a thin white tongue coating, and a superficial pulse. The differences between these two formulas are as follows. Baidu-san primarily treats wind cold with dampness attacking a constitutionally deficient body. Treating suppuration, sores, and ulceration is its secondary function, and this secondary function may not be listed in some texts. Baidu-san contains Renshen, radix et rhizoma ginseng, to treat skin disorders characterized by the presence of wind and cold with underlying weakness and deficiency. Jingfeng Baidu-san primarily treats initial stages of dermatological disorders with wind, cold, and dampness accumulating in the muscle layer. Localized redness and swelling along with exterior signs of cough, body aches, headache, and absence of sweating are present. Jingfeng Baidu-san does not contain Renshen, radix et rhizoma ginseng, primarily treats skin disorders characterized by wind and cold without underlying weakness and deficiency. So that's the main difference between these two. And that's our comparisons. Let's talk about biomedical indications. Scheid and his team say with the appropriate presentation, this formula may be used to treat a variety of biomedically defined disorders, primarily acute infections, including the common cold, influenza, mumps, bronchitis, dysentery, and the early stages of boils. It has also been used for allergic dermatitis, urticaria, and eczema. Shen and Chen say this formula has many clinical applications: influenza, common cold, respiratory tract infection, infection with fever, cough, hoarseness of voice, nasal congestion, parotitis, which is inflammation of the parotid glands, urticaria or hives, eczema, suppurative infection, rheumatism, dizziness, and acute viral hepatitis. Let's look at the science. Chen lists several clinical studies with positive findings involving this formula, treating infection with fever in children in 136 patients, treating viral upper respiratory tract infections or URTIs in 37 infants and young children. A modified version was studied for treating acute viral hepatitis in 152 patients. And another study of 36 patients used a modified version of this formula for treating parotitis, which is that inflammation of the parotid glands. No systematic reviews of Ren, Shen, Baidu-san were found on a literature search. I love my systematic reviews, couldn't find any. Let's talk about drug-herb interactions. A few herbs in this formula may present some risks for drug-herb interactions. Cytochrome P450 interactions may include Glycerocerate radix gansal may induce cytochrome P450 2C19 and 3A4. That's licorice. Zingiberis rhizoma recens Shenjiang, that's fresh ginger, may inhibit 2C19. And Ginseng radix Ren, Shen may inhibit 2C9, 2C19, and 3A4. We're particularly worried about 3A4, and we have a couple herbs here that may affect 3A4. A large epidemiological study, N equals 1,795, so a big one, showed increased adverse effects in patients taking Chaihu, Zhizi, Wuweizi, Shu and Shengdiwang, Mutang, and Cheiqianzi with clozapine, quetiapine, and olanzapine. So that's Chaihu is the one that's in this formula as well. A case was reported of congestive heart failure and hypokalemia, or too little potassium in the blood, in a patient taking gansal, licorice, furosemide, and digoxin. Gansal may increase blood pressure and fluid retention when used with oral contraceptives, as shown in 2 case studies and an uncontrolled human study. Ren, Shen increased the serum concentration of digoxin in a single case study. In 1 case study, Ren, Shen was thought to decrease INR in a patient stabilized on warfarin. A case study showed raised plasma levels of raltegravir 30 days after starting Ren, Shen supplementation, which tapered off after stopping supplementation. So there are definitely some potential drug-herb interactions here to be aware of. Concerns overall, more traditional concerns. Scheid et al. Says, because of the warm drying properties of many of the ingredients, it is important to remember that this formula is indicated only for externally contracted wind, cold, dampness, and is contraindicated for cases due to heat or damp heat. Chen say the dose of Ren, Shen, radix rhizoma ginseng should be carefully adjusted according to each patient's condition. It should not constitute more than 10% of the entire formula. Baidu-san was originally designed for children. For adults who do not have significant Qi deficiency, the dose of Ren, Shen, radix rhizoma ginseng should be decreased. Baidu-san is a warm, acrid formula that is contraindicated in cases of exterior wind heat invasion, interior heat, or yin deficiency with exterior invasion. And there we go. That was our Spurbs Herbs of the day. And that was our today's formula: Ren, Shen, Baidu-san, or ginseng powder to overcome pathogenic influences, a useful formula for treating colds or external attacks with underlying deficiency. Started as a children's formula, but became an important formula for all patients. We got straight into today's formula because there was so much to cover, including its ingredients, commentary, the science, our concerns and cautions, as well as its potential drug interactions. All in all, this was another spacewalk exploring a fascinating and useful Chinese formula. In 2 weeks, we are going to be looking at another single Chinese herb, gaoben, Ligusichi rhizoma, or Chinese lovage root. This herb is in the Chinese medical subcategory of warm, acrid herbs that release the exterior. Besides helping treat external attacks or colds, it can be helpful in treating pain and wind dampness. As usual, we will explore all the intricacies of this herb, as well as an explanation of its category. And, as always, we will look at something a little different. Join us in 2 weeks for another interesting episode. I want to thank you very much for listening today. If you like this podcast, please do us a huge favor. Subscribe to our podcast in your favorite podcast app. That helps us immensely, and thank you for even considering it. Don't forget our absolutely amazing continuing education deal at www.integrativeMedicineCouncil.org/CEUS1, and you can get just an amazing deal on continuing education and a free book signed. And you can always get in touch with me at Dr. Greg at spurbsherbs.com. That's SPERBSHERBS.com, or at our website, www.spurbsherbs.com. Again, thank you very much. And we have our usual bibliography. Thank you.
Spurbs Herbs.
The proceeding was presented by Dr. Greg Sperber. We would like to thank Janelle for all her support and everybody else who contributed to this program.
Timothy Dobbins,
Rogers,
Campbell,